Hi guys, hope you're having a good afternoon and you didn't get too exhausted at school. We are going to do a little bit of a review today. And just to keep you guys on your toes, I am going to give a gold star to whomever can find the animal in every video. So every video will have an animal. It might be an animal made out of something, and you have to guess what that animal is. So you have to find it in the video, and you have to guess what it is and then tell me the next day. So as you're looking for that, hopefully you're paying attention to some math as well. So since we're doing a little bit of review, it's kind of hard because we went over the first part of ratios and then we went and took a little break for fractions, and now we're back to ratios. So it's going to be really important to do review to help us remember all this. Ratios, if you guys have this picture in your book as well. And if you look at this thing, this diagram here, it says ratios, and it has a whole bunch of different little webs coming off ratios. And so I just want to walk through that real quick. Ratios are for real life situations, and that's the last most recent unit we did. We took some story problems, some real life situations, and we said, how does that relate to our ratios? So ratios are for real life situations. They also are used to compare numbers and quantity with the same units. And as you'll see down here, it says a ratio compares two or more numbers. And it also says when two quantities have the same units, you can compare them using a ratio without units. So we normally recognize, sorry, my pen's not working. Let me switch that out. We normally recognize a ratio as a colon right here, and that is a ratio. But as we learned when we first did our ratios, a ratio can be written any number of ways. If you look right here, it's just two numbers like our 2 and 4, or here they have 3 and 4, which can be written three ways. It can be written the most common way, like a 2 and a 4 with a colon, or it can also be written 2 to 4, or like they said right here in your book, 3 to 4. Or it can also be written like a fraction, or a fraction is just a division problem. So it can be written as a division problem. The same. So these are the three ways we recognize ratio. This one's probably the most common way that we recognize it, but it can also say 2 to 4, the ratio of 2 girls to every 4 boys, or it can also be written as a fraction, 2 girls to every 4 boys. So I want you guys to recognize that in our review. A ratio can be expressed as another equivalent ratio by multiplying the terms of the ratio by the same multiplying factor. So that's kind of what we've been learning over the last couple days. If I want to take, say, this ratio 2 and 4, and I want to change the ratio, what we learned over the last couple days is I can take 4 and times it, or divide it, but for this right here it shows if we're using multiplication to find an equivalent ratio, we can use multiplication or division. So I'm just going to use multiplication, and I'm going to go 4 times 2 is going to equal 8. Oh, sorry, I'm writing off the page. Let me write up the page. 4 times 2 is going to equal 8, but then whatever I do to this side, just like a fraction, whatever I do to the bottom I have to do to the top. Whatever I do to this side of the ratio I have to do with this one. So I'm going to times that by 2, and that's going to equal 4. So my new ratio would be 4 to 8. So we can either multiply or we can divide in order to make an equivalent ratio, just like we can do to make an equivalent fraction. So given two equivalent ratios, you can find an unknown term given the other three terms. That's also kind of what we've been working on the last couple days. I'm going to turn my paper over here so I have a fresh slate. And we worked on, if I had, one of your questions last night was how many red marbles, how many green marbles, sorry, this pen is not writing well, and how many blue marbles, and it would give you the ratio of the red and the green marbles. But then the next ratio said the amount of green marbles to blue marbles. So what you had to do was figure out Here are two of the same items, green marbles. And so I believe in our problem that you had last night, it said there was 3 green marbles, but then in the next ratio, it had changed that to 9 green marbles. So we just had to figure out what did sorry, I'm going to get another pen because apparently this one doesn't want to work again. So it would have 9. So we had to figure out what did we times 3 by to get 9. Oh, we times it by 3 because 3 times 3 is 9. So then whatever I do to this side, I would have to do to the other side of my original ratio. Not this one because this is blue marbles. We didn't have that in our original ratio. So I would times this red marbles by 3 since I had to times the green marbles by 3 to get my 9. And my ratio would then turn to I believe, I'm not sure what the number was, but I believe it was something like 4. So let's say there were 4 red marbles, and that would equal 4 times 3 is 12, and 3 times 3 is 9. So now I know how many red marbles is 12. Sorry, I went off the page again. How many red marbles is 12, and how many green marbles is going to be my original number down here, 9, and how many blue marbles would be, I don't remember what it said, maybe 16. So that's what this is talking about, is given 2 equivalent ratios. Originally we were given the 2 red and green ratios. We can find the unknown term for the other ratio. So we could find how many red if we changed the green to 9, and then the blue would stay the same because it was part of the ratio that was already made bigger. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. I want to go over a little bit of vocabulary and then we'll be done. Sorry last night's video was so long. This one will be a little shorter. So our vocabulary, we're going to go right here, and I'm going to zoom in so we can see our vocabulary a little bit better. Okay, using these questions to review chapter vocabulary, I'm reading right down here. The what of 2 quantities, such as 2 and 5 would be those 2 quantities we're talking about, can be written in 3 ways. So 2 to 5 would be our ratio, but it can also be written 2:5 or 2, remember the very first one would always go on the top, 2/5. And the answer to our vocabulary would be the ratio of 2 quantities can be written all of these 3 ways. Then in the ratio 3 to 1 to 6, the number 3, 1, and 6 are the what? And they call these the terms, which is really simple. It's just a different word for the numbers when you're talking about ratio, but it would be terms. So our vocabulary words so far are ratio and terms. The ratio of 2 quantities and the terms are the numbers in that ratio. Lastly, over here, number 3 and 4, when the terms of a ratio are divided by their greatest common factor, the resulting ratio is remember, divided makes it smaller, so that would be the simplest form. When we take it down to its simplest form, or reduce it is another word for it, or make it smaller, all of that just means you're dividing it down to the simplest or the smallest form. So whenever you see it's divided by the greatest common factor, it means simplest form. And all of these things that I'm telling you right now should be in your notes. So hopefully you have been writing. If not, you might want to rewind and start writing. Last term is ratios that are the same ratio when written in simplest form are called, and the answer is equivalent ratios. Just like I did on our paper right here, we said, I'll show it to you one more time. I said, okay, I'm going to times 3 by 4 to get 12, and I will times 3 by 3 to get 9. Those would be an equivalent ratio because I just timed something. You can also divide, and it will make it a smaller number. So hopefully this is helpful. This is kind of reviewing our chapter. Way up here at the top, we talked about all the things we can do with ratios, real life situation, we can use to compare numbers and qualities in the same units, and it can also be expressed as a fraction. an equivalent ratio, and then we can multiply it or divide it to make that equivalent ratio. And then our terms are ratio is the ratio is called the two numbers that we're comparing, and terms are the numbers that it's using. Simplest form is when we divide it by its greatest common factor, and the result is the simplest form. And ratios, to make an equivalent ratio, we would have the same ratio just written in its simplest form. So hopefully you have all those vocabulary terms and the things that ratios can do written down in your notes, and we will check those tomorrow and talk about our review. Thanks so much. You guys have a great night, and don't forget to remember the animal. I am not a great sculptor, but there was an animal in there that I sculpted, and you get to figure out what it is, which may actually be harder than your math problems. So hope you guys have a great night, and we will see you tomorrow.